Good morning and welcome again to Word of Faith Fellowship radio program. This is Mark and I'm here with Douglas, and we want to share with you today some keys that we believe will help you to fight and resist and combat the devil. The devil's after you. In case you haven't known it, the devil has been after you since you were born. The devil wants to kill, steal, and destroy your life. He wants to pull you to hell with him, where he will end up for eternity. And so today we want to share with you about how to be aware, be on guard against the devil, because the devil is actually roaming around, says like a lion, and he is looking for that opportune time to come after you. The Bible actually talks about how the devil's just waiting. He's waiting to pounce. He's looking for that time when you're weak. Maybe that time when you're sick. Maybe that time when you're tired. You've been up all night and your emotions are a little bit not quite right and you're not on guard, and the devil's waiting. He's always watching for you to be in a state of weakness so he can come after you. And so today we want to help you and share with you keys that we're seeing in the scriptures so you can be on guard, so you can be aware when the devil's trying to come at you, and you can resist him and he will flee. So Douglas, get us started here.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here again. I have a good friend, Larry, and he does a lot of exhorting at the church, and he always starts out by saying, last night I was reading. And then he gives us a great exhortation. So the other night I was reading, and it reminded me of Larry. And I was reading in Luke, and I was reading the account of when Jesus was tempted by the devil. And temptation, well, let me just read verse 13. The devil had come to tempt Jesus and had tempted him in the wilderness. And in Luke 4, verse 13, it said, "And when the devil had ended every temptation," and in the Amplified it says, "when the devil had ended the complete cycle of temptation, he temporarily left him. That is, he stood off from him until a more opportune and favorable time." And when I read that verse, and the word opportune jumped out at me, because the devil feeds on what works inside of us. Right. And Jesus came to set the captives free. He came to set us free. And God, through Jesus, has provided us a way that we can be totally free from the devil, that we can be totally free to do God's will. However, the devil is always waiting, like Mark said, for an opportune time or an opportunity to come into our lives and cause us to stumble and fall, so that he can just destroy our lives. And as I thought about this, then I was reading in Mark about Herod. And in Mark chapter 6, in verse 21, it says, "But when an opportune time came for Herodias, when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles, the high military commanders, and the chief men of Galilee." Now, if you go back and you read this account in Luke and in Mark about Herod and Herodias, John the Baptist had come to Herod on many occasions. In Luke chapter 3, verse 19, actually I'm right here in Luke, it says in verse 19, it says, "But Herod the Tetrarch, who had been repeatedly told about his fault and reproved with rebuke, producing conviction by John for having Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, for all the wicked things that Herod had done." And so Herod had a relationship of sorts with John the Baptist, who came into his life on many occasions to correct him about the way that he lived.
Right.
And so then when you read here in Mark, this is very important because in Mark chapter 6, it says in verse 21, it says here, let me back up a little bit because this is a very important account here. The disciples had been sent out by Jesus, and he gave them power to cast out unclean spirits and heal all kinds of sicknesses and diseases. And they were doing that, and word got back to Herod, to his court, to the people that were around him, and they were all wondering who was behind all this. Of course, it was Jesus, and his name had become very well known around, and Herod hadn't come in contact with him yet, but he was soon to. But when Herod, verse 16 says, but when Herod heard of it, he said, this is John, this is a recount of Herod's situation with John the Baptist and with Herodias. For when Herod heard of it, he said, this very John, whom I beheaded, has raised from the dead. For this Herod himself had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had told Herod, it is not lawful for you to have, you have no right to have your brother's wife. And Herodias was angry and enraged with John the Baptist and held a grudge against him and wanted to kill him. But she could not. For Herod had a reverential fear for John, knowing that he was a righteous and a holy man, and continually kept him safe under guard. And when he heard John speak, he was much perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly. I think that's the way a lot of us have been. When the word of the Lord comes, when correction comes, we're perplexed with what we hear, but it's not enough to cause us to humble ourselves and repent and turn our hearts to Jesus.
Right.
Verse 21, but an opportune time came for Herodias. Now remember, she hated John. She was angry. She was enraged with what he was telling Herod.
Right.
Verse 21, but when an opportune time came for Herodias, when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles and the high military commanders and the chief men of Galilee, for when the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased and fascinated Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you desire, and I will give it to you. If you go on, it says about the half the kingdom. Okay. So she goes to her mother and said, what should I ask Herod? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. An opportune time had come.
Right.
Now, when you're holding, and you want to do certain things, and they're not right, you will wait. You will wait until the opportunity arrives.
Right.
And then you'll take advantage of that to bring the destruction or the hurt or what you want to have happen. Right. And that's exactly what happened here. Mm-hmm. She waited for an opportune time. And that's the way the devil does with us. And like Mark pointed out, you could be have a bill that's unpaid, and you manifest about it. You get into strife with your wife or your husband, whatever the case may be, and your job, something goes wrong. I mean, there's 1,001 situations right. that can arise where the devil is just waiting.
Right.
It's said that when the devil had ended the complete cycle of temptation. He temporarily stood off and waited. He was waiting for Jesus to get to that time when possibly he was, like Mark said, he was tired, or the pressure was on for the people. He was continually being surrounded by people and pulled on by people to do things out of the will of God, and so temptation has a cycle, and if you read in the Bible, there's three major places where that is brought out. One was in the Garden of Eden, when the devil came to Eve. He tempted her with the lust of the flesh, with the lust of the eyes, and with the pride of life. And the second one was with Jesus, when Jesus was in the wilderness. He hadn't eaten, he was hungry, and the devil came to him on many occasions and said he tested him exceedingly and tried to get him to say and do certain things. And Jesus did not fall for all that. But the same thing came to Jesus: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And then I wrote down on my notes here, and the rest of humanity.
Right.
Because, and you can read that in 1 John. If you have your Bible, you might want to just turn there in 1 John chapter 2, because this is gives a great definition of what those temptations are. Because the way I see it, as reading the Bible and looking, all temptations fall in these three categories.
Right.
So, and there's nothing new that's happened under the sun. The devil completely keeps going around and around and bringing us back. And if he can't get you one way, he'll give you a whole new scenario with it and come up with a whole different plan. But in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, it says, "Do not love and cherish the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh." Now, what is the lust of the flesh? It's the craving for sensual gratification. Make me feel good.
Right.
Our whole generation is brought up on, Mark, make me feel good.
All right.
Go to the movies, go to the amusement parks, go to the concerts, go do this, go do that. You want a faster car, you want more money, a better job, and all these things. Lust of the flesh, craving for sensual gratification. You're looking to find satisfaction and promise in what you're doing, and it always lets you down. It always lets you down. That's the lust of the flesh. Then the lust of the eyes. What is the lust of the eyes? It's greedy longings of the mind. Greedy longings of the mind. You can't get enough.
Right.
And that's the way it is. You cannot satisfy a devil. Devils cannot be satisfied. You do one thing, they want another, and then another, and then another. The progression goes in our generation with drugs. I mean, I know children that have been in third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade that have started on doing drugs. Why? To make them feel good, but it doesn't.
Right.
You start smoking cigarettes, you're a candidate to start smoking marijuana. And then it goes to pills, and then it goes to cocaine, and then it goes to heroin, and we find ourselves in a mess. And that's the place I found myself in. You're searching to feel good. You're searching to satisfy those longings of the mind. You're never satisfied. It's always got to be a faster car. It's always got to be a better job. It's always got to be more money. Yep. And so it goes on to say, and the pride of life. And what is that? Assurance in one's own resources, your own mental ability, your own physical strength, your own coordination, your own ability to do things. Right. The stability, the pride of life is assurance in one's own resources. You know you can do it. I don't need anybody's help. Right. I can do it myself. and the stability of earthly things. Listen, if we've ever lived in a time of instability, is that a word? Instability?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We're there now.
Right.
I always tell this story. Many years ago, there was a community in India, and an earthquake came, and everybody in the community was killed. Everybody. Because they had just finished a celebration to the goddess of the dead, and they had prospered, and they made these cement block homes, and the whole community collapsed, and everybody was killed.
Right.
You better not put your stability in earthly things. You better not put your trust in earthly things, because that whole earthquake happened in a minute or less, and a whole community was wiped out.
Right.
So this is the way the devil does it. Through the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, he will come after us to attack us and to destroy our lives. And that's what happened with Herodias, and that's what happened with Herod. That opportune time came, but you know what their end was. It was destruction. You cannot come against the purposes and the ways of God and succeed. You will be destroyed in the end. And there's a verse in Hebrews chapter 4, and verse 15, it says, this is a little bit of good news for you here. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to understand and sympathize and have a shared feeling with our weaknesses and infirmities and liability to the assaults of temptation. But we have a high priest who has been tempted in every respect as we are, yet without sinning. Now that's the Savior that we serve.
Yes.
God came in the person of Jesus Christ to destroy the works of the devil, and he did.
Right.
Making us an opportunity, making us a way that we could live in that kind of a victory and that kind of a freedom that Jesus lived in.
Right.
And it said here, it said that Jesus shared our feelings. He was a man. Just we forget that.
Right.
But Mark, he was a man just like you.
Yeah, he was in the flesh. Everything that we experience, he experienced.
That's exactly right.
He was subject to all of the temptations we are in the flesh.
Every single one of them. And it says he shared in the feeling of our weakness. And I wrote down, real quick this morning, I wrote down my note here, the word weakness means a state or a condition of lacking strength. Jesus, many times, he was asleep in the boat. You know what I mean?
Right.
He had worked, he worked all the time doing the will of God. And I'm sure he came, as it says right here, it says he did. He shared in our weaknesses. He felt those times. And it said times of infirmities. The word infirmity is physical or mental weakness. I mean, as Mark pointed out in the beginning, when the demand is on to hear and to obey and to do what's right and to take hold of what God wants you to do, many times the devil comes, says, you're too tired to do that.
Yeah.
Look what you've done. I mean, he always exaggerates everything. He attacks you mentally. He attacks you physically. He attacks you spiritually. He's waiting for an opportune time to get us in a place of weakness and infirmity so that we can step out. You know, that's what it says that in Luke, that the religious leaders hated Jesus. And they sent people to kind of push him to see if you could say something out of place, but they have something to accuse him of.
You know, I have seen this stuff with so much in my life and in other people's lives. There's so many situations that the devil's just waiting on, and I'm thinking of all these examples as you're sharing. I remember, you know, when we had our child Elizabeth, and you know how it is when you have a baby and the baby is not sleeping at night, right? So, and then of course I'm working and Holly's working, And so, like, we're just up, you're up at night, and so now you're going through these, long periods of time, you're not sleeping, and who's going to get up and change the diaper or pick her up and feed her or whatever. And I've seen this with other couples too. They get the first child, and you are not sleeping at all. And so the devil wants to come right then, after you've gone for weeks at a time, and it's like, who's gonna, get up and do, and the devil really tries to come, like you said, when you go and go and go, you don't have much sleep, you're tired, you've got the pressure of all this work and this and that, and that's when the devil's looking for all of these things, and he comes in to try to bring strife, and he tries to bring disunity, and he's waiting for you. And I've seen this at times when people were sick, and you don't feel good, and then the devil's coming there to try to make you just irritable, and when somebody comes and talks to you, you just snap back. And so we've seen these things. With Job, and Job was tested, and his wife came and said, look, why don't you just curse God? So you have all of these people around you that are trying, they're trying to tell you to do something against God.
Right, exactly.
And so we have to realize that when we go through our day, we need to realize that the devil's watching for all of these things we're going through. And what you said, Jesus is the high priest, and he's the one to help us no matter what we're going through. Even though we may be tired, even though we may be sick, even though, like you brought up about finances, I've seen this with people who you may not have the money to pay a certain bill, and the devil will try to come in and bring fear, and so the devil's looking for these opportune times to come, and it shows what's in our hearts. Will we turn our hearts to God? Will we turn our hearts to God, or will we, in that state, come under the temptation?
That's right. And you have to remember, in Corinthians, Paul said there's no temptation that comes into our life that's uncommon to man. God always has a way of escape.
Right.
If we turn to him. And don't misunderstand us. We're not trying to say that God's just going to work you as a minister or as a mechanic or as a lawyer or a teacher, and just until you work yourself into the ground. God asks us to do things, but he gives us the ability to do them.
Right.
It's when we get outside of his will and try to do it in our own ability that the frustrations come, that the attacks come. And
That's good.
But I want you to hear this verse here in when we're talking about the temptations here, because this verse reminded me of you, Mark, because you're a lawyer. But it talked about that he shares in our weaknesses and our infirmities, and the liability to the assaults of temptation. And I thought, but Jesus was one who has been tempted in every respect as we are.
Right.
Yet without sinning. And I thought about the word liability. That's a good word. That's a good
legal term.
Legal term.
Yeah.
But you have liability insurance for your automobile.
Yeah.
So what is that? And it says, and I looked up the word liability, and it means a state of being responsible for something, especially by law.
Right.
So, and I wrote down a little note here. I said, we have the responsibility by law to deal with temptation when we're faced with it.
Right.
Now, in Genesis chapter 4 was the account of Cain and Abel brought their sacrifices before the Lord, and Abel's was accepted. He gave a blood sacrifice. Right. And he understood about the necessity of forgiveness and being covered by the blood of the Lamb. And but Cain gave a product, a work of his own ability, of his own strength, his own knowing on how to raise the vegetables and the fruits of the ground from a ground that had been cursed.
Right.
So his offering was not accepted. And this is what it says here, talking about liability and being responsible for taking hold of the circumstances and situations that we're in.
Right.
But it says here, the Lord said to Cain, because when he corrected Cain, Cain was angry.
Right.
He said, "Why are you angry? And why do you look so sad and depressed and dejected?" Because the way we live is written on our face.
Right.
You can tell when somebody's been having a hard time when they walk into a room, just by
Right.
the way they look a lot of times.
Sure.
And it says here, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin crouches at your door. Listen carefully. Its desire is for you,
Right.
but you must master it. Now that means we can.
Right.
When God says, "Be holy as I am holy," that means we can be holy.
Right.
There is an opportunity there
Yes.
to be free
Right.
if we take it,
Yes.
if we take hold of that opportunity.
That's really
And so temptation's desire, sin's desire, the opportune time to get caught in a trap is out there looking for us.
right.
But we can master it.
Yes.
And that's the good news. In John chapter 14, it says this. It says, Jesus speaking, he said, "I will not talk with you much more, for the prince, the evil genius." You know, the devil is considered an evil genius.
Right. Right.
He's not stupid. He's very, very conniving and very manipulating.
Right. Right.
But it's all for evil. It's
Right.
all to steal, kill, and destroy. It's not to do our good. It's to
Right.
destroy us. But for the prince, the evil genius, the ruler of this world is coming. He has no claim on me. What a testimony.
Right.
He has nothing in common with me. Nothing. There is nothing in me that belongs to him. He has no power over me. Now, Jesus could say that because he always did what his father. And if you read the next verse, verse 31 there, in John 14, it says that, let me just read that verse too, because
And while you're turning there, Douglas, one thing that we need to stress is this, that we can walk like this too.
yes,
And because of what Jesus did, and when you are born again, his spirit comes in us, and we can walk like this. We can actually say in our hearts, because of what he did, he's our high priest, and he can actually change our hearts, and we can literally turn to him and rely on the fact that when he was here, there was no common ground in him, and then he's inside of us. And so now we have this Jesus who has no common ground, and we can actually resist the devil because he's inside of us, and because he gives us his ability and his grace to defeat the devil.
that's such good news. Isn't that great news?
Yes.
So yes, we can be holy. We can be.
Right.
That's such a
Right.
joy. So we have to quit making excuses why we can't be,
Right.
and take a hold of how we can be.
Yes.
He said, "But Satan is coming, and I do as the Father has commanded me, so that the world may know."
Right.
He lived the way he lived so that we would know.
Yes.
Be convinced that I love the Father and that I only do what the Father has instructed me to do. That's the way he wants us all to live.
Right.
We can live that way. God tests our hearts, expecting us to make it.
Right. Right. And it's all because of him. It's because of the work that he did while he was here. He made the way for us. So we're out of time, but we want to encourage you. Be aware. Be aware today as you're going through your day. Be aware that the devil's looking for those opportune times in your life. And you have Jesus Christ, who's already been through every temptation in every form that the devil has. And Jesus walked above it. And so now Jesus is going to help you. He's going to hold your hand. And when those temptations and those pressures come, you can turn your heart to Jesus and he will show you how to come out. So we're out of time, but thank you again for listening. This is Word of Faith Fellowship Radio program. We're on it Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9. Go to our website and you'll see all our radio programs videoed, wordoffaithfellowship.org. Thank you very much.